It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and this is a special time about the movies because, okay, let me try to explain what I was going to do. This week I have the week off of work because we have Still CityCon coming up this week, and my plan was to try to wrap up 1993 before then. And we're about halfway through the year, and I thought to myself, okay, I'll do a Time About the Movies weekend where I'll put out a number of episodes over the course of a couple of days, and hopefully by the time the Steel City Con starts, I can worry about that. Yeah, I made the mistake yesterday of realizing that I was supposed to do that this past weekend, and yeah, so I'm gonna try something here. If it does, I'm gonna do this for this week, for these next couple of weeks in 1993, and then tomorrow I'll do the same thing for another couple of weeks in 93. I want to try to get 1993 done by the time Thursday comes around, because Thursdays are setup days. So I'm gonna try something out here. It may not work. It may not be something that I want to do over and over again, but we're gonna see what happens here. I'm gonna do every movie from July 23rd to September 24th, 1993. That's 3 months worth of films. And when I got the footage here, I counted up how many I had. There was over 40 movies that I'm going to look at, so 44 in total. So what I'm trying to say here is strap yourself in, go get some popcorn, grab a drink or something, because I'm just going to do lightning round reviews of these movies. I'm going to do about a minute's worth of material for each movie, just to try to rush this out of here, and rush this through, get this going, because this is going to be a very long video, and also because there are going to be some movies that I didn't get to. There's a couple of documentaries that come out in between these months that I couldn't find any footage of, and honestly, that probably helps me out here. But, okay, 44 movies. I'm going to try to do at least a minute's worth of a review for each film. So, buckle up, strap yourselves in. Let's jump on into it, and we'll start off with the weekend of July 23rd with the biggest new release of the weekend, and that is John Singleton's follow-up to Boys in the Hood, and that is Poetic Justice. So this is the movie that stars Janet Jackson and Tupac Shakur, and of course comes after Singleton did Boys in the Hood. And I think because of that goodwill he built up with Boys in the Hood, I think that at the time this was considered a massive disappointment. But I am glad to see that this movie has gone on to have a lasting following and has aged well and has gotten better and better with age, because it really has gotten better and better with age. Yeah, the story can be very formulaic at times. It has pretty much a very typical premise for this type of a movie, but the dialogue, the chemistry between Jackson and Shakur, as well as the rest of the cast, I think really does keep this movie afloat, and it's one of the more underrated films of the 90s, honestly. I am glad to see that it has a following over the years, and it definitely shows how Singleton's direction has evolved during this decade, as we would see in films later to come. So, really recommend Poetic Justice. Let's move on to the next movie that we have here, and that is Coneheads. So this was Saturday Night Live's follow-up to Wayne's World. Wayne's World was such a big success, they said, you know what, let's do a movie about the Coneheads. And, honestly, that could have been pretty fun. And it's just like, the movie just really didn't do that. I think the basic problem with Coneheads is that there's no real motive for this except, but hey, Wayne's World did it, let's do it again with the Coneheads. But the difference between Wayne's World and Coneheads is that Wayne's World was self-aware of what it was, but still manages to work because of the well-written characters, the great catchphrases, the memorable moments. Coneheads seems way too more serious in terms of its tone. Yeah, it's a comedy, but it's not a self-aware comedy. But they want you to believe that it's a realistic comedic situation that can be relatable, and it suffers because of it. The stuff that does work. Some of the jokes are funny. Aykroyd and Curtin stay true to their characters, but besides that, the movie's just kind of meh. I remember watching it as a kid and enjoying it, and it's fine for what it is. It definitely could have been a whole lot better, though. So, it's certainly a lot better than our next movie, and that is Another Stakeout. A sequel that came many years too late after the original film. I mean, the original film came out 6 years before that, and they went for the PG-13 crown because the first movie was rated R, but we got to bring the kids in here. Hey, Rosie O'Donnell's in here. We got to bring the kids into this, and I like Rosie O'Donnell, but I really think that she really wasn't set right for this particular role. It's a movie that it's great to have Richard Dreyfuss and Emilio Estevez back, and even the same director, John Badham, is also back for this particular film. And but overall, it's a lackluster comedy that, like I said, tries to go go a little too mainstream. Like I said, the PG-13 rating to try to bring the kids into this as well. Kids don't remember the first Stakeout movie, and for obvious reasons, because it's rated R and it was much funnier. This is just pretty generic, lackluster, and not funny whatsoever. But at least it was better than Weekend at Bernie's too, which I guess that's the only caveat they have there. On to the next week, the 30th of July, and the first movie that we have, Rising Sun, with Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes. Based off of the book by Michael Crichton. Of course, Michael Crichton wrote Jurassic Park, which was the big hit at the time. I guess they were probably going off on that because I don't know why they would move this so closely to Jurassic Park, but yeah, a pretty lackluster action thriller to say the least. You got Sean Connery, Wesley Snipes, and Harvey Keitel in here, and you would think there'd be a great movie there with these people involved and a good story, but I don't know. I think Black Rain did it better, honestly. It's just not an enjoyable action movie on any level. There's great talent in here, but there's just nothing really all that exciting or interesting or even unique to make it stand out on its own, except for the fact that the same man that wrote Jurassic Park wrote this. And okay, so what? Is the movie any good? Not really, no. But yeah, that's Rising Sun for you. So on to the next movie, a much better comedy, I should say, Robin Hood Men in Tights. A nice return to form for Mel Brooks, who had a couple of stumbles in between Spaceballs and this movie, more notably Life Stinks, which was not a very good movie, but this is a nice return to form. It's a nice, funny parody of Robin Hood. Cary Elwes is very funny in here. The cast overall is very hilarious, has a lot of great moments in there that are just so memorable. Just a ton of fun, really funny movie, a quotable movie, to say very much so. And it's a really fun movie. It was not well received at the time, but I think, like with Poetic Justice, it's gone on to have a cult following over the years, and it's become an overall incredible film overall. So, incredible film, a great comedy overall, and it is an incredible film. I like how it makes fun of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves too, and in so many ways, like with Kevin Costner's, with Cary Elwes actually having the British accent compared to Kevin Costner. So yeah, Robin Hood Men in Tights is a pretty good movie, a pretty good comedy overall. Next up, another comedy, So I Married an Axe Murderer. Mike Myers' follow-up to the Wayne's World movie, and certainly not a better movie than that one is. This movie's okay though. It does have a couple of funny moments, a couple of memorable moments. I like Mike Myers and Nancy Travis in this, and I just think it's overall an okay film. It's nothing spectacular. It's nothing incredible. It's fine for what it is. I didn't know until recently that the Mike Myers Netflix show, the Pentaveret, I think that's how it's pronounced, actually took characters and conspiracy theories mentioned in this movie and put it into that. So I guess that amounts to something. The movie does have a cult following too, so I guess that also makes sense too. But I thought it was alright for what it was. Not a memorable movie, but I'm glad I saw it. So I Married an Axe Murderer. And now on to the next movie, and it's one of my worst movie picks of all time, and that is, of course, Tom and Jerry the movie. Just an ugly, ugly movie on so many levels. Not for the animation. The animation is great, but just the way that Tom and Jerry are just relegated to second bananas in their own movie. And they talk in the movie, they're supposed to be friends throughout the course of the movie. That's not Tom and Jerry. That's why I always will defend the 2022 Tom and Jerry movie. It's not a great movie, but certainly beats the crap out of this movie. And they waste really good animation. This is Film Roma. This is the company that did The Simpsons and Garfield and Friends. And just wasted it on this movie that's just so bad, so badly done. It's a movie that it's such a mess. And to waste the music of Henry Mancini on this too, it's just it's one of my worst movie picks of all time. One of my top 30 least favorite movies of all time for a reason. And like I said, it's why I will defend the 2022 movie till death. That's pretty much all I got to say about that one. Let's jump into August with a good movie, a great movie, I should say. Harrison Ford in the film adaptation of The Fugitive. maybe one of the best adaptations of a television series ever. I mean, directed by Andrew Davis, who did Under Siege, and featuring a phenomenal cast, which includes an Oscar-winning performance by Tommy Lee Jones as the agent that's going after Harrison Ford's character. It's just an incredible movie. It's a great action thriller. It's a great thriller all around. Just a great adventure. You're following these characters around. The action sequences are very well done. They still hold up all these years later, and it's just a great movie all around. It's just an amazing film. It's a ton of fun. A great film. Can't recommend it enough. I also recommend U.S. Marshals too. We'll get to that one when that comes out, but it's a very underrated spin-off film which features Tommy Lee Jones reprising his role as the agent going after. He went after Harrison Ford in this one. This time he's going after Wesley Snipes, and I think that's a pretty good movie too. Not as good as The Fugitive, but still pretty fun all around. So, okay, next movie, The Meteor Man from Robert Townsend. One of the earliest superhero films to actually feature a black person in the starring role. Robert Townsend, of course, is the man who did Hollywood Shuffle. He also did the Five Heartbeats, and this movie didn't do anywhere near as good as those other movies, but I do have to commend it for at least trying to do something unique and different. I think there are definitely aspects in here that could work, but I think I think just the script overall is not all that exciting or unique. The comedy isn't really all that exciting. The action sequences aren't that fun either. It doesn't really know what kind of tone it wants to set for itself, and I think that's one of the reasons why it backfired big time. And I think it was one of the ones that, for Robert Townsend, his career kind of took a downturn after this. I don't remember him doing anything hugely significant, unless I'm forgetting something right off the bat. But yeah, as far as I know, he didn't do anything as significant as Hollywood Shuffle or Five Heartbeats after this. I think this movie kind of killed his movie career. But I could be wrong on that. Once again, I'm trying to move these along here, so I don't have time to do the whole research. But Meteor Man, intriguing idea, just bad execution. So with that said, next movie, and that is My Boyfriend's Back. Directed by Bob Balaban, his second movie as a director. He also directed Parents, which we talked about on here before. And simple premise here: a zombie wants to go on a date with this person that he falls in love with, and it's kind of a nice little throwback to kind of what these B movies of the 50s and 60s were like. And honestly, I found it kind of enjoyable. I like these two leads that they have here, Andrew Lowry and Tracy Lynn. I thought the comedy overall was nicely done. It knows what it wants to be. It knows it's intentionally silly. It's over the top, and it's honestly a kind of a little fun movie. It didn't do well critically or financially, but I am glad to see that it has somewhat of a cult following over the years, and it is actually a nice little surprise. I was actually really amazed at how much I enjoyed this movie, but yeah, My Boyfriend's Back. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. You might be pleasantly surprised by it. On to the next movie, a movie I really know nothing about, so we will quick on this one, The Wedding Banquet. Haven't seen it, so I can't really say too much about it. The only thing that I know that's notable about this movie is that it's directed by Ang Lee, and this is actually his second movie that he did following Pushing Hands, which came out the year before. And that's pretty much all I know about this movie, and it actually does kind of look pretty fun. It's basically about a gay Taiwanese immigrant man who marries a mainland Chinese woman to placate her parents and get his parents to get her a green card. His plan backfires when his parents arrive in the United States to plan his wedding banquet, and he hides the truth of his gay partner. It's a fun little concept, but I really don't know too much about it, but could be something good. So, yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say about The Wedding Banquet. On to the next movie, on Friday the 13th, and what a coincidence, it's a Friday the 13th movie, Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Man, this movie lies to you on so many levels. First off, it's not the last Friday the 13th movie because they'd make more after this. And it's the worst Friday the 13th movie. I didn't think they'd do worse than Jason Takes Manhattan, but I'm sorry. When you take Jason Voorhees and turn him into this worm-like creature, you really have missed the mark big time. And wow, this movie misses the mark big time. The only thing that's notable about this is that it teases the eventual Freddy versus Jason crossover that we get, but yeah, other than that, this is the worst one of the series. This really is the worst movie in the Friday the 13th series. And Jason is a worm. What more do I even need to say to you? It's a bad movie. Anyway, on to the next movie, and that is The Secret Garden. I'm only starting to realize now that 1993 actually had a ton of really good family movies. This is one that's very underrated. Produced by Francis Ford Coppola and based off of the book by Francis Hodgson Burnett. This is directed by the same person that did Europa, Europa, and some other movies, To Kill a Priest, A Lonely Woman, and would later go on to direct notable film things such as A Shot in the Heart and Rosemary and the 2014 remake of Rosemary's Baby. It's a fun little movie. It's a nicely visually pleasing movie. It's a nice, enjoyable story. You like these characters. You like the setup. It's a ton of fun. It's a very underrated family film. If you haven't seen it, I'd say definitely check it out. It's a really underrated film, and it's a great family film. It's one of the many underrated family films we're going to get into in this particular stretch of movies that I have here. And yeah, Secret Garden. It's a very underrated film. I'd say definitely check it out. And you should also check out this next movie because it also is a very underrated film, Heart and Souls. I mean, Robert Downey Jr., Kira Sedgwick, Charles Grodin, Alfre Woodard, Tom Sizemore, Elizabeth Shue, David Paymer, B.B. King, and Kurtwood Smith is also in here, as well as Chloe Webb from Twins, and it's directed by the guy who did City Slickers. I mean, what more can you say about it? It's a nicely made film. It's a great movie with a great cast overall. A lot of funny moments, a lot of good romantic moments. Robert Downey Jr. really gets his chance to shine in this movie, and he really does have one of the. This is probably one of his most underrated films, if not his most underrated film, because he's so good in this movie. He is just phenomenal in here, and everyone else in here is very good as well. It's a movie that I'm glad to see is getting more of a following over the years. It's gotten some Blu-ray releases. If you haven't seen Heart and Souls, please go and check this out. It's a very underrated film, a great film, fantastic film. Can't recommend it enough. Heart and Souls, great movie. Next film I have here is another underrated film, Joe Mantegna in Searching for Bobby Fischer, also with Ben Kingsley. Written and directed by Steven Zazilian, who was best known for writing Awakenings and would later win an Oscar for writing Schindler's List. You've got Max Pomerantz playing the young kid in here, and Joe Mantegna's playing his father. Joan Allen is the mother. Ben Kingsley, Lawrence Fishburne, and it's again kind of like with The Secret Garden. It's a nice little family film. It's got some good acting from everybody in here. You're really invested in this character and the situation that he finds himself in with this chess tournament. And it's just got a lot of great performances all around. Mantegna, I think, gives one of his best performances in his career in this movie, honestly. And I like him in this. I like Ben Kingsley a lot. It's a nice little film. It's one that I don't think gets a whole lot of attention, but it is something that I really do recommend you check out. It's another great underrated little film that came out around this time period. Searching for Bobby Fischer. And as I go to the next list here for August 20th, we're getting into the next set of movies we have here, and that starts off with Jean-Claude Van Damme and John Woo's Hard Target. So this was John Woo's first directorial effort in America, and was actually the first major Hollywood film made by a Chinese director. And Universal was so nervous about Woo directing the film, they sent in Sam Raimi to look over the film's production, and there was a lot of misfires behind the scenes, and I think it definitely shows up on screen. But the movie overall, it's okay for what it is. It's Jean-Claude Van Damme doing what Jean-Claude Van Damme does so well, and I think John Woo would later find success later on with stuff like Face Off and then Broken Arrow, Face Off, and then as they went forward with that. But I mean, for a first movie here in the States, it's not a bad film. It's just a lackluster film, to say the least. It's a movie that doesn't really have a whole lot there to make it stand out on its own, but for what it is, it's perfectly fine for what it is. So that's really all you got to say about Hard Target. Next movie we have here, and that is Surf Ninjas. You wouldn't believe that this was directed by the same man that did Bachelor Party almost 10 years ago. But Surf Ninjas. Remember, bend your knees, move your arms. Ernie Reyes Jr. from Ninja Turtles 2. Rob Schneider's in here. Leslie Nielsen plays the bad guy. Corny movie as hell, but a fun corny movie. And, Leslie Nielsen playing out of character for him, at least from the Naked Gun movies. It's silly, it's stupid, it's not really all that engaging or exciting, but it's fine for what it is. It's a nostalgic guilty pleasure, honestly. It's a movie that I don't watch a whole lot, but when I do, it's like, okay, that takes me back to when I watched this movie when I was a kid. So, not a good movie whatsoever, but for what it is, it's a nice piece of cheesy, nostalgic fun. Surf Ninjas. Next up, Woody Allen with Manhattan Murder Mystery. Of course, Woody Allen directed this. This is the eighth and so far the last movie that he's collaborated with Diane Keaton on. Um, it's an okay movie, a movie that began as an early draft of Annie Hall and then eventually became its own thing. It's fine for what it is. It's Woody Allen doing what Woody Allen does so well. It's a decent movie. Not one of his strongest films per se, but it does have its funny moments. It has a lot of the same things that you like in most Woody Allen movies, and I don't know. It was overall enjoyable for what it was. It's not something that I'm going to remember for a long period of time, but it's a movie that I do watch occasionally if I want to go through the Woody Allen filmography, and I'm just kind of like, okay, that was pretty good for what it is. But yeah. So that's pretty much all I got to say about Manhattan Murder Mystery. On to the next movie, and that is King of the Hill. Steven Soderbergh directed this movie, his follow-up from Kafka. Uh, Jesse Bradford, who you may remember from such films as Clock Stoppers and Swim Fan, is in this movie. It's one of his earliest film roles, and it's one of Steven Soderbergh's most underrated movies. It's a film that kind of is underrated because he's made so many great movies in his career, and not a lot of people really get the chance to talk about this one, but it's a great movie, great cast overall. Bradford's in here. You see Adrian Brody in there, Jerome Crabb, Lisa Eichhorn, Karen Allen, Spalding Gray's in this, Katherine Heigl, Lauren Hill, Amber Benson from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Just a great cast overall, great film overall, very underrated Steven Soderbergh movie. And with that said, on to the next movie we have here, and that is The Ballad of Little Joe. So basically, it's Mulan in the Wild Wild West. I mean, I haven't seen this movie. I can't really comment on it too much, but I just know that this movie was one of the top movies that came out that weekend. It's got Susie Amos, Bo Hopkins, Ian McKellen, Heather Graham, Melissa Leo, and I don't know. Could be good. So, not much more I can say about that one. On to the next movie, and that is Wilder Napalm. Most notable because of the couple of names that are attached to it. Of course, Dennis Quaid's in here, Deborah Winger, Arliss Howard, Glenn Gordon Caron, the creator of shows like Moonlighting and Medium, but most notably Vince Gilligan, who also is best known for his work with Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. I was going to say Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, but you get the idea. I haven't seen this movie, so I can't really comment on too much. But Vince Gilligan wrote it. That's got to be something of noteworthiness. And that's pretty much all I got to say about Wilder Napalm. I know nothing about this movie, so that's pretty much all I got on that one. So on to the next movie, Needful Things from Stephen King. Not one of Stephen King's most memorable movies. This is directed by Charlton Heston's son. And actually, the only movie that Charlton Heston doesn't show up in from the director's son. It's got Ed Harris, Max von Sydow, Bonnie Bedelia, J.T. Walsh, and I don't know. It just didn't feel like a movie that really. It basically had kind of a one-note premise, and Max von Sydow is great in anything he's in, usually for the most part, and he is having the time of his life in here, but he's the only thing that's really carrying this movie of noteworthiness. Everything else just kind of like, it's there, there's nothing really all that interesting or exciting about it. There's a 4-hour cut of this movie that aired on TBS in the 90s where they put in an hour's worth of footage, and this movie's already 2 hours long, so you basically have a 3-hour movie extended to a 4-hour film now. No, a 3-hour film extended into a 4-hour time slot, which doesn't make any sense, but this movie is just meh. So, Mel Gibson's next with A Man Without a Face. Not a bad directorial debut from Mel Gibson, but it definitely feels like an Oscar baitish type of movie. It felt like a movie he was trying so hard to get an Oscar for, instead of actually writing a really good script. But I think he made up for it with the next movie that he directed, which was Braveheart, which eventually was an Oscar winner. Like I said, the movie overall it's perfectly fine for what it is. I just don't think it really did anything that special or unique to make it stand out over some of the other much better films that were coming out at the time. So, yeah. That's pretty much my thoughts on The Man Without a Face. On to the next movie, and that is Mark Dacascos in Only the Strong. I really have no idea what the hell is going on in this movie. It looks like it's trying to be Dangerous Minds mixed with a martial arts movie, but it definitely does not show any memorability whatsoever. In fact, this movie has under 8% on Rotten Tomatoes, so not a lot of people really enjoy this movie. It probably shows why, because this movie doesn't look exciting whatsoever. That's all I got for you on that one. Only the Strong. Next movie, Patrick Swayze in Fatherhood. Not a very good movie from Patrick Swayze. I think this is one of his more notorious flops that he's ever done. It's written by the same man that wrote Endless Love, and that was a great movie. That's pretty much all I got to say about this one. It's not just wasn't very funny. Just was very lackluster. I don't know what kind of a tone it even wanted to set. It's a movie that's instantly forgettable. So, Fatherhood. Speaking of forgettable movies, remember when Roberto Benigni was Inspector Clouseau, son of the Pink Panther? Another great movie where Henry Mancini wastes his talents, and Blake Edwards, he basically just said, fuck this shit, I'm out, because he retired from filmmaking after this, and it's not because of a lack of trying. I guess, Roberto Benigni isn't a bad choice to play the new Clouseau, but you gotta come up with some funnier jokes and material than what they've been doing in these latter Pink Panther movies. Like, once Peter Sellers died, it was like, this series was just, it went down the toilet quickly, only to have somewhat of a brief revival with the Steve Martin movies. But even then, those movies are not even anywhere close to what Peter Sellers was able to do with the original Pink Panther movies. And, it's just not a good movie. It's just not really all that exciting. The only thing that's great about it is the opening sequence with, why am I forgetting his name now? Bobby McFerrin doing the Pink Panther theme. That's it. But other than that, this movie was a complete dud. So, on to the next movie, The Thing Called Love. The last thing River Phoenix ever did before he died a couple of months after this movie came out. You got Samantha Mathis in the leading role, and there's nothing really all that interesting or unique about it that makes this stand out on its own. It's pretty much a movie that's been done over and over again, but I don't know. I thought it was all right. I think the performances overall really are what carry it over. Mathis, I think, does a very good job in here. Phoenix is very good here. So is Dermot Mulroney, Sandra Bullock, directed by Peter Bogdanovich. It's an okay movie. It's not a great film all around, but I enjoyed it for what it was. So, next up, and that is a largely forgotten movie directed by Stuart Gordon, featuring Christopher Lambert, and also starring Kurtwood Smith again. Vernon Wells is also in here. Just kind of follows the similar things to most sci-fi movies that are trying to start off a new series of films. Intriguing premise, just not the right execution overall. That's pretty much everything I got for you on this one. So, that's Fortress. Let's move on to the next movie, and that is Jason Priestley in Calendar Girl. This movie is directed by the guy who did Big Mama's House 2, and Deck the Halls, and Big Mama's Like Father Like Son, and Malibu's Most Wanted, and See Spot Run, and I think you get the idea that this is probably not going to be a good movie, especially despite that trailer looking somewhat promising. But this movie has been largely forgotten, even though it had a big controversy with the casting of a hearing actor to play a deaf character. They cast Kurt Fuller, who you remember from Ghostbusters 2, and it was Karl Rove and That's My Bush. They cast him in that role despite them having a number of qualified deaf actors who would have been suitable for that, and it caused outrage in the deaf community, which ended up in a series of protests across the country for this movie that has a decent premise to it from the trailer alone. But man, what did you expect from the guy who made two Big Mama's House movies, honestly? But that's Calendar Girl for you. So on to the next movie, and that is California. From the director of Gone in 60 Seconds, the remake, and now why can't I remember the other movie? I just had it. Swordfish. Good lord. Brad Pitt, Juliette Lewis, David Duchovny, Michelle Forbes. I've only seen little bits and pieces of it, but it's got some good reviews. Got a lot of praise for Brad Pitt and Juliette Lewis. And Brad Pitt had himself a pretty good September because we're going to get to one of his other big hits from this month coming up. But that's pretty much all I know about it, this movie. From the little bits I've seen, it looks very promising. So, California. California. And I just realized that I completely missed out on another movie here, Boxing Helena. But I just talked about this movie in a post on the website, so I'll go ahead and put a link to that either in the corner here or in the description below. And this is the problem with me rushing through these movies. So we're almost done though. So on to the next movie, and that is Kathleen Turner and Dennis Quaid in Undercover Blues. Kind of a really lackluster comedy that again wastes its talented cast on it. Kathleen Turner, Dennis Quaid have been very good in other movies. They just really don't have much to do in this movie, and the premise really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. A great cast overall in this movie is completely wasted here. Fiona Shaw, Stanley Tucci, Larry Miller, Park Overall, Tom Arnold, Dave Chappelle, Sal Rubinek, Jennifer Lewis. Just a good cast here. I also don't think the direction was there, what kind of a movie it wants to be like. So, yeah, pretty forgettable movie, Undercover Blues. On to the next movie, a much better movie, and that Brad Pitt film I was talking about, True Romance. One of Tony Scott's best movies overall. Just a phenomenal film. The reviews for this in that spot you saw pretty much say it all. It's very much a 90s version of Bonnie and Clyde, with a great cast: Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer, Gary Oldman, Brad Pitt, Christopher Walken. Just a great cast. One of the early scripts by Quentin Tarantino. He actually sold this to make Reservoir Dogs, and just goes to show you how much of a presence he was back then. Makes a great movie like this that has this massive cult following over the years. Gets these nice releases by Warner Brothers and then later on by Arrow. And for good reason. It's a very underrated thriller. It's a great romantic crime thrill. One of Tony Scott's best movies. That's pretty much all I got to say about True Romance. Here's another Val Kilmer movie, this time with Kim Basinger, The Real McCoy. So Kim Basinger basically plays a person who's been released from prison with nothing but the clothes on her back. Before being incarcerated, she was the bank robber of her time, and unfortunately, she's being brought back into the game to save her son and her new boyfriend, played by Val Kilmer, with Terrence Stamp as the bad guy in here. And haven't seen the movie, haven't heard too much about it. I usually see it at like thrift shops and all that, and haven't heard too much about it. And I don't think many people really remember this movie all that much, but that's probably not a good sign for this particular film. So that's pretty much all I got for you on that one, The Real McCoy. So next movie we have John Cusack in Money for Nothing. The story for this sounds really interesting. This guy is a guy who discovers $1.2 million that fell off of an armored van, and this is a fictionalization of the events depicting his struggles of keeping the money over 5 days. And it sounds like a really good premise. Unfortunately, I think the movie itself doesn't really have that much of a following to it, and it's a shame too, because it actually does have a cool premise, and John Cusack looks like he's having the time of his life with this. So I haven't seen this movie, I can't really comment on it, but it has some promise to it. So who knows? It might actually be something worth watching. But that's pretty much all I got for you on this one, Money for Nothing. On to the next movie, probably the most notable film besides True Romance that came out this weekend, The Joy Luck Club. So this is directed by Wayne Wang, and when it came out, it was one of those movies that everybody was talking about as this big sleeper hit. It was getting a lot of praise by critics, and it was seen as a mostly successful movie. I haven't seen this movie myself, and I've been wanting to see this movie for a while now. I just never had the time to really get the time to watch this movie. But it overall looks like it's a well-made movie. I don't think it's a classic movie per se. Or I don't think it looks like a classic movie, I should say. But I don't know. Everyone keeps saying it's a really good movie, so I don't know. It's got some people I really like in it. Lauren Tom, Ming-Na Wen, Mulan. You have Andrew McCarthy in here, Russell Wong. Some notable names in here, and the stuff I've seen looks pretty promising. The little bits of I've seen of this looks pretty promising, so could be good. But that's one of the big notable releases that came out in '93. One of the big hits, sleeper hits of the year. That's the Joy Luck Club. So moving on to the next movie, and that is Bruce Willis and the action thriller Striking Distance. Another one of those movies that's obviously not very good, but I kind of enjoy it mostly because it takes place in the city of Pittsburgh, and I don't know, I kind of like seeing 1993 Pittsburgh in this movie. I mean the Three River Stadium, seeing the area where the casino is at now, being at completely empty, and much different than what it looks like today. I mean, it's nostalgic for me. I mean, Bruce Willis is pretty good, pretty fun in this movie. The action sequences are a ton of fun, even though they don't make a whole lot of sense, especially if you live in the area and see some of the bridges in town and the roads that they don't take you on in real life. And I don't know, man. I know it's ridiculous. I know it's stupid. I know it's not a very good movie, but I don't know, man. I enjoyed it enough to. It's another one of my guilty pleasure movies. It's a movie that I personally really enjoy. Striking Distance. With that said, on to the next movie, Martin Scorsese's The Age of Innocence with Daniel Day-Lewis, Michelle Pfeiffer, and Winona Ryder. I mean, it's Martin Scorsese basically trying to Oscar bait with a period piece movie, but you know what? It's Martin Scorsese doing a period piece movie. I mean, how can you go wrong with that? And needless to say, it works pretty well. I like the performances by Daniel Day-Lewis, Michelle Pfeiffer, especially Winona Ryder, who I think a lot of people really began to understand with this particular movie how great of an actress she really became. And we've already seen her in great movies before this, but I think this was the movie that really kind of pushed everybody to the edge of realizing that, hey, this chick's actually pretty good as an actress, and she has to work really well against Daniel Day-Lewis and Michelle Pfeiffer to make this work, and sure enough, she does make it work really well. A great film overall. Even for people that don't really like period pieces, you'll definitely see a lot of what makes Martin Scorsese so special when you see this movie. It's nice to see him doing these different movies that are not outside of his usual norm. And, yeah, pretty good movie. Pretty damn good movie. That's The Age of Innocence. Now on to the next movie, and that is Into the West. So the film centers around two young boys whose father was the king of Irish travelers until his wife, Mary, died during the birth of their second child. And the boy's grandfather is an old storytelling traveler who tells the children Irish folk tales and legends, he's followed by a beautiful white horse. And from the seat of Dublin, the boys and the father have now settled down to a grim tower block in Ballium. The boys are overwhelmed with joy and dreams of becoming cowboys. The horse is stolen from them. They begin their adventure to get the mystical horses back. They escape the poverty of a North Dublin council estate and ride into the West, where they find the horse is not just a horse. And judging by that, you can tell that I haven't seen the movie, but it looks fun. It looks like a fun little movie. It's written by the guys who did My Left Foot, so there's another winning piece on that front. So I haven't seen it, but definitely shows a lot of promise from that. So Into the West, and on to the next movie, and that is Airborne. I mean, that's what the 1990s was like for the people who made this movie. At least that's what they think it is, because, yeah, this is not a very good movie. This is a movie that feels like a studio executive was trying to figure out what did the kids of the 1990s do and act like, and put it up on the screen here, and it leads to a lackluster movie that's not really all that engaging. It's not really all that amazing. It just feels like a dated piece of 90s fluff, which could be seen as that. Some people may like this movie just for the nostalgic factor, but for me personally, I thought it was just kind of mediocre. You get to see Jack Black in one of his early film roles along with Seth Green, so there's something there. That's Airborne, and now we're finally on to the last weekend of this block, September 24th, 1993. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, Macaulay Culkin and Elijah Wood in The Good Son. Why do I keep doing that with my thumb? I keep pushing it this way, but anyway, The Good Son. Interesting concept. I like the idea of Macaulay Culkin trying to play a more serious role, playing a psychotic killer kid, but just not the right execution. I mean, he's trying his best, but every time I look at him in this movie, I just think to myself, Kevin McAllister was much more threatening than you are, kid. I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. Elijah Wood is trying his best here. So is the rest of the cast, Wendy Crewson, David Morse. but just a good idea, just a bad execution. And it just doesn't feel like a movie that really doesn't work. Again, Kevin McAllister is much more of a threatening presence from Macaulay Culkin than this kid is, and that's a huge problem. So, on to the next movie, and that is The Program. This movie's okay for what it is. It's largely forgettable, except for the fact that they actually took out a scene from the movie where one of the characters lies down in the middle of a road lane driver, and it was during traffic as cars are just coming through at highway speeds, and somebody was influenced by that scene and actually decided to do it, and it resulted in a death and 2 injuries, and it resulted from the movie being taken out of the theatrical release of the movie. And so far, the movie itself that has never had this clip seen in any other versions of it, and the clip of this is actually seen in commercials for the film as well, and therefore it was on VHS. So if you go online, you could find little bits of this clip, but I don't know if this actually the full clip itself is online, but that's the only thing that people really remember about it mostly, and that's probably not a good thing for this particular movie. And even it's from the same guy that did Major League and King Ralph too, so if you're trying to be too serious about this movie, you kind of failed on that front, buddy. With that said, on to the next film, Warlock, the Armageddon. Because just calling it Armageddon is just too much. We've got to call it The Armageddon. And it was their failed attempt to try to make this character into a franchise since he came from the previous movie. But nobody bit. The movie didn't do so well, got bad reviews, and I guess this character... Well, okay, they did make one more movie, but I think that was direct-to-video. But even by that point, it's just like, you tried to make this into a series, and it just didn't work, so... That's pretty much all I got for you on Warlock the Armageddon, so let's move on to a much better movie, and that is Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. Did it again. One of Richard Linklater's best movies. It's the movie that everybody remembers. Great cast: Jason London, Ben Affleck, Mila Jovovich, Cole Hauser, Parker Posey, Adam Goldberg, Nicky Katt, Joey Lauren Adams, Roy Cochrane, Matthew McConaughey, following these Texas teenagers during the last day of school in 1976. And need I say more? It's a classic movie on so many levels. A funny movie, quotable lines all around, memorable moments. Just a great, great movie. One of Richard Linklater's best movies. Need I say more? Dazed and Confused, man. And we finally reached film number 44 on this long, long edition, and that is Bofa. The directorial debut of Morgan Freeman, starring Danny Glover, produced by Arsenio Hall. Haven't seen this movie, so I can't really comment on it too much, but doesn't look too bad, and it does look like something interesting from Morgan Freeman, who has never... I don't think he's ever directed another movie after this, as far as I know, but, I mean, you got Danny Glover, you got Malcolm McDowell, you got Alfre Woodard, a good cast overall. I mean, it could be good, but I haven't heard too much about it, but, like I said, it could actually be something worth watching, so maybe one day I'll definitely get around to it, but, that's pretty much all I got for you on that one. So that's Bofa, and that concludes this long look at the 3 months between July and September 1993. So that concludes this experimental episode of Time About the Movies. We're going to do another one tomorrow, looking at the beginning of October 1993 and going all the way to the start of December 1993. 10 weeks overall, October 1st through December 3rd. And then on Wednesday, we'll wrap it up with the final 3 weeks of 1993, the 10th, the 17th, the 24th, and the 31st. And then when I get back from the Comic-Con, we'll jump into 1994, and then we'll go from there. So, with that said, thank you very much for sticking around for this. It's an experiment. We'll see how this works. But until then, thank you for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page. Check out the previous episode. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for another episode. So thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. And until then, as always, take care.